The Galactic Council had never felt the weight of its own uncertainty until now. An urgent transmission flashed across the vast council chambers, and the once harmonious hum of diplomacy shifted into a low, electric murmur. Representatives from a dozen species sat at the elongated table, their eyes darting nervously to the projections on the screens in front of them. The image displayed a solitary, rugged planet, a once peaceful world, now under human occupation. A sprawling human colony. But it wasn't the thriving colony that had their collective attention. It was the unexpected reports coming from the planet's inhabitants that had them rattled. "This is an emergency meeting," said Ambassador Karos of the Arathri, his tone sharp. His four dark, reflective eyes gleamed with agitation. "What we are hearing about Earth, we are not prepared for this." "Prepared for what?" asked Xyler, the Holithian envoy, his thin, translucent skin rippling in subtle waves of anxious energy. "The humans are territorial. Their colonies are aggressive by nature. What could possibly be new?" "The reports," Karos pressed, "are saying that the human settlers on the planet, they have adapted in ways we never anticipated. We're not talking about survival on a mild world. We're talking about death world adaptation." The term hung in the air like an ominous cloud, causing several representatives to recoil. It was a phrase no one had spoken aloud in the council for centuries. Death worlds. The very concept of a species surviving and thriving on a planet so hostile it would kill most others within hours was unheard of. Yet here was Earth, a world long known for its violent history, now holding the potential to reclassify itself among the galaxy's deadliest. "This cannot be true," barked Ambassador Irosh of the Driddy, an insectoid diplomat whose clawed hands clacked against the table in agitation. "We have studied humans for centuries. They are unpredictable, yes, but nothing suggests they have the capacity to evolve into such a dangerous force." "They don't just adapt, Irosh," Karos continued, voice hardening. "They conquer their environments. The reports from Earth are clear. They have not only survived a world with multiple natural hazards, but they have turned those dangers to their advantage. Some of their cities are built directly in the most hostile zones of the planet, zones that would incinerate most species. And they are expanding." "Impossible," muttered Xyler, shaking his head. "We knew they were resilient, but this—" Karos' gaze shifted to the other side of the table, where the SGOVA delegation sat in tense silence. The SGOVA were known for their immense wisdom and cool-headedness, yet even they looked uneasy. Ambassadors Kel and Tan exchanged a brief glance before Kel spoke, his voice gravely low. "The report also includes a disturbing new element. Human aggression is not just a defense mechanism. They are actively seeking out death worlds, planets with environmental extremes that would kill any other species within days. And they are conquering these worlds. They are learning how to master them." A shiver passed through the chamber. "That's not possible," Irosh insisted, though his voice faltered. "How are they able to survive where no other species could even set foot? Is that the question we should be asking?" Kel's voice was calm but steely. "Or should we be asking why they feel the need to conquer worlds that, quite frankly, should be left alone?" "I suggest," Karos interjected, his eyes narrowing, "we start preparing for the worst-case scenario. Earth is no longer just a primitive world. It is evolving into something far more dangerous than we ever imagined." Xyler's voice was tinged with disbelief. "And what exactly do you suggest, Karos? We invade Earth? Force them into submission?" "No," Karos replied, the sharp edge in his voice cutting through the debate. "But we need to observe them closely. We need to understand what they have become before it is too late." The council fell silent, the weight of Karos' words settling over them. The idea of the Galactic Council, the dominant force in the galaxy, being threatened by a single species was inconceivable. And yet, as the reports from Earth kept flooding in, the unease in the room grew. For centuries, the Council had kept the peace, making careful alliances and avoiding outright war. But if what Karos was suggesting was true, the very balance of the galaxy might be at stake. "I will personally request an envoy to Earth," said Kel finally. "We will see firsthand what this new phase of humanity means for us." "We can't afford any more delays," Karos said. "If we're wrong, we'll have learned too late. If we're right," he let the sentence trail off. The chamber went quiet again as the gravity of the situation sank in. For the first time in centuries, the council wasn't sure how to proceed. Could humans truly be Deathworlders? And if so, was the galaxy ready for what that meant? The moment the human ambassador stepped into the Galactic Council chamber, the air felt different. It wasn't just the weight of their history pressing down, nor the tension of the situation. It was something unspoken, an undeniable presence that made even the seasoned diplomats of the council pause. The human delegation, led by Ambassador Rhea Donovan, entered the room with a calm yet resolute demeanor, as if they had no fear of the beings who had once dominated the galaxy's power structure. The contrast was palpable. The counselors, in their resplendent robes and sleek, fluid movements, looked to her with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and, for some, thinly veiled concern. Earth had always been a backwater planet, a place where humans fought amongst themselves and struggled for survival. Yet here they were, standing at the threshold of galactic power. Ambassador Donovan raised a hand, signaling for silence. Her presence demanded attention, though she spoke not a word. One by one, the other ambassadors reluctantly fell silent, their eyes flickering toward the humans, who stood confidently at the center of the room. Their demeanor suggested that they were not the ones being judged today. "Ambassador Donovan, welcome," said Karos of the Arathri, the first to recover. His voice was both authoritative and tinged with caution. "You've requested this meeting with urgency. I trust that the reports you've brought us are as dire as your tone." Donovan nodded, but didn't immediately speak. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the alien faces before settling on Karos, who regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice calm, yet carrying the weight of something unspoken. "Not dire," she said evenly. "Necessary." The room fell silent again. A simple word, but one heavy with meaning. She wasn't here to beg for forgiveness or plead her case. She was here to lay the facts bare, and from the determined set of her jaw, she seemed prepared for whatever response came next. "You've seen the reports," Donovan continued, her gaze unwavering. "We've encountered situations on Earth you're simply not prepared for. And we've survived them. It's time for the galaxy to face the reality. Humanity is no longer just a footnote in the history of the galaxy. We are a force to be reckoned with." The words landed like a bombshell. Several ambassadors shifted uncomfortably, their expressions unreadable, though their antennae and subtle body language betrayed their discomfort. The term Deathworlder was not used lightly in galactic circles. To be a Deathworlder meant to live on a planet so hostile that any species capable of surviving it had to be inherently dangerous, unpredictable, and, more often than not, unstoppable. But for a species like humanity, to be called a Deathworlder was to be labeled an anomaly, a threat. "I think," Donovan continued, "it would be in the Council's best interest to take a closer look at what humanity has achieved. You think we are violent, unpredictable, and chaotic. But what you fail to see is that those qualities have become our strengths." Karos was the first to speak again, his voice sharp, almost defensive. "Your species is violent by nature, Ambassador. We've read your history, your wars, your plagues, your environmental devastation. And yet we're still here," Donovan interrupted, her tone unyielding. "We didn't just survive. We adapted. And we thrived." Thrived. Xyler, the Holithian envoy, blinked his transparent eyes in disbelief. "You've conquered worlds, hostile worlds. That much is clear. But that doesn't make you any less dangerous." Dangerous. Donovan's smile was almost imperceptible. What's dangerous about survival? What's dangerous about a species that can adapt to a planet's most deadly features? What's dangerous about a species that can turn catastrophe into opportunity? The council was quiet. The phrase "turn catastrophe into opportunity" seemed to cut through their skepticism, sparking an uncomfortable thought. What if humanity wasn't just a fleeting inconvenience? What if they were a species that could not only survive, but reshape the galaxy's balance of power? Donovan seemed to sense the shift in the room's atmosphere. Let me give you an example. On Earth, we've faced extreme environments. Frozen tundras, boiling deserts, oceans filled with deadly creatures, forests teeming with predators. Yet, against all odds, we've mastered them. Where other species would perish, humanity adapts. We don't just endure, we conquer. She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. We've learned how to live in places where life is not supposed to exist. And we've made it work. Ambassador Irash, the Dritty envoy, who had remained mostly silent until now, leaned forward, his insectoid eyes fixed on Donovan with an intensity that felt almost predatory. What are you suggesting, human? That we learn from you? That we should welcome you as equals? Donovan met his gaze with a measured calmness. I'm suggesting you need to understand what we are before you make that decision. You fear us because you don't know what we've become. You've underestimated us for too long. Earth's people have learned to survive in ways that should be impossible. And now you want to judge us by ancient records? You want to dismiss what we've become based on the past. The room fell into silence again, as if each counselor were weighing her words. The question hung heavy in the air. How had humanity, a species once so small, so vulnerable, evolved into something that might now be too powerful to control? I think, Donovan said finally, her voice cutting through the tension, that you need to take a long, hard look at what humanity is capable of. Because if you don't, you may find yourselves on the wrong side of history. Karos, usually unflappable, exchanged a glance with Kel of the SDOVA. Their eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. This human, this representative of Earth, was no longer just a curious anomaly. She was a harbinger of something far greater. And the question that gnawed at the edges of the council was no longer what humanity could do. It was what would they do next. The truth was becoming undeniable. As Ambassador Donovan stood before the council, her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the growing unrest in the room. She had presented her case, outlining humanity's startling capacity for survival in environments where every other species would fail. But now, the implications were settling in, like a slow tide rising against the foundations of the Galactic Council. The question was no longer whether humanity was capable of such feats. It was why they had evolved this way, and more importantly, what they would do with their newfound power. You speak of surviving hostile worlds, Karos said, his voice still tinged with disbelief. But survival alone doesn't explain your sudden rise. There's something more here, something unsettling. Donovan's expression remained steady. I'm sure you're right, but the answer isn't what you think. Humanity didn't just survive death worlds. We conquered them. A ripple of unease spread through the council chamber. The term death world had been used for centuries to describe planets so perilous that only the hardiest species could endure. The creatures that called them home were often as dangerous as the environments themselves. For a species like humanity, with a history of conflict and fragility, to have mastered such places, it was nothing short of a paradigm shift. Conquered. Irash of the Dritty's voice quivered slightly, his many legs shifting nervously. How? What does that even mean for a species that's been so chaotic? Humanity is chaotic by nature, Donovan replied, her voice cool. But chaos breeds resilience. We learned to harness it, to thrive in it. Take the case of Earth's oceans. They are filled with creatures capable of tearing apart most life forms. But we didn't run. We adapted, built vessels, and learned to navigate through the dangers. Adapting, said Cal of the SDOVA, his gaze fixed on Donovan. Is that all? Or is there something more you haven't told us? There's an underlying power. You cannot hide it from us. Donovan's eyes flickered briefly, as if considering how much to reveal. You're right. It's not just adaptation. It's evolution. Humanity, in its desperate fight for survival, unlocked something no other species had: the drive to innovate, to bend the universe to our will. Our need to survive became a blueprint for something greater. and now we carry that power with us wherever we go." The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. They were beginning to grasp what she was implying. Humanity had not only learned to survive death worlds, but had actively shaped them to their advantage. The very nature of their existence had become a weapon. "What you must understand," Donovan continued, "is that this is not about aggression for the sake of it. We don't seek to dominate because we are violent. We seek to dominate because we have to. We survived by overcoming our environment, and now we face a universe that is equally hostile. We're not looking for war, but we won't back down." "Your species is too unpredictable," Xyler of the Holithian said, his voice tight. "What you're describing sounds more like a kind of inevitability, an unstoppable force." Donovan's lips parted in a faint smile, though her eyes held an unsettling intensity. "That's exactly what we are. The universe has always thought of humanity as fragile, a species on the brink. But we are not fragile. We are the embodiment of survival. And that's why you fear us." Karos was silent for a moment before speaking again, his voice softer, but no less troubled. "The reports on your expansion are concerning. You're not only surviving on hostile worlds, you're claiming them. How many more worlds will humanity conquer before you are seen as a threat to the very balance of this galaxy?" Donovan's gaze was unwavering. "As many as it takes. But make no mistake, we're not here to destroy everything in our path. We're here to ensure our survival, and we'll protect Earth at any cost." A tense silence filled the chamber. The council was no longer simply debating humanity's future. They were confronted with the reality that Earth's unexpected evolution had turned the once dismissed species into a formidable force. The concept of humanity as a Deathworlder species was no longer an abstract theory. It was now a living, breathing, conquering truth. Ambassador Irosh's voice broke the silence. "You speak of survival and protection, Ambassador Donovan. But what happens when your definition of survival leads you to act in ways that endanger the rest of us? How long until humanity's fight for survival threatens the entire galaxy?" "That," Donovan replied, "depends on whether you see us as allies or enemies." The room was quiet. The council had reached an impasse. But one thing was clear. Humanity was no longer a side note in the galactic story. They were the central players in a drama that had only just begun to unfold. The legacy of Earth as a death world was not just a title. It was a harbinger of things to come. Humanity never waits for permission to act. Within hours of the meeting with the Galactic Council, Earth's military forces began to mobilize. The planet's response to the growing tension was swift, efficient, and unsettlingly confident. The Council's diplomats, still reeling from Ambassador Donovan's revelations, had no idea how quickly their decision to engage with humanity would escalate. They had assumed that Earth would be intimidated by their galactic authority, that they could manage the human problem by diplomacy. But they had underestimated a fundamental truth. Earth had never relied on diplomacy to survive. It had relied on action. "I don't think they fully understand what's coming," General Maria Harris said, her voice steady as she addressed the War Council inside the UN Command Center. "The Galactic Council may think they're dealing with an unruly species, but they're about to realize we're something much more dangerous." The holographic map in front of her flickered with bright lights, marking key military installations on Earth and its colonies. Harris, a seasoned leader, had spent her life preparing for this moment. She knew that humanity's strength lay not in numbers, but in their capacity for unexpected, overwhelming force. It had been humanity's survival instinct for millennia, and now it was their greatest asset. "Do you think they'll strike first?" asked Admiral Rajiv Kumar, his voice cutting through the tension. He wasn't as confident as Harris. He knew how unpredictable the galaxy could be, and he couldn't help but worry that the Council would see humanity as a threat to be neutralized quickly. "They already have," Harris said grimly. "The reports from our outposts are clear. Some factions in the Council have already deployed fleets to Earth's borders. They think they're sending a warning, but they're making a mistake." Kumar's brow furrowed. "What mistake?" "They're assuming we'll back down. They're assuming we're afraid of their fleets, their weapons, their power, Harris said, her voice rising. They don't understand that we've already survived worse. We've been fighting wars since the dawn of our species. They've never had to face an enemy that doesn't fear death, that doesn't back down. The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over them. The human race had long been known for its tenacity, its drive to survive even the harshest conditions. But now, for the first time, that trait was being directed outward, toward the stars. We'll show them how we fight, Harris continued, turning to the massive screen that displayed an image of Earth's newly designed warships. The ships were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, sleek, efficient, and deadly. Unlike the massive, lumbering warships of the Council's fleets, Earth's ships were built for speed, maneuverability, and precise strikes. They were designed not to wage conventional warfare, but to overwhelm and outlast their opponents. "They'll be here in days," said Commander Julia Cross, her voice tight. "And when they arrive, we'll be ready. But this isn't just about defending Earth. It's about sending a message." "What message?" Kumar asked, puzzled. "That humanity is no longer a backwater species," Harris replied, her eyes gleaming with determination. "We are no longer just survivors. We are conquerors." The room seemed to hold its breath as her words echoed. The fleet was ready, the weapons primed, and Earth's forces were prepared to do whatever it took to protect their home. But Harris wasn't just thinking about Earth's defense. She was thinking about the message they were about to send to the galaxy. For centuries, humanity had been underestimated, dismissed as weak and fragmented. Now, in the face of an unprecedented galactic threat, they would show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Council's envoys were already making their way back to their respective species' homeworlds, the weight of their failure pressing heavily on them. They had expected humanity to be scared, to cower before the combined might of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. But what they had encountered instead was an unexpected resolve, a species unafraid to face down the unknown. "Humanity has done the unthinkable," Karos of the Arathri said, his voice strained. "They've shown us a side of themselves we never anticipated. They are no longer a species we can control." "I agree," Zyler said, his voice thoughtful. "They are unlike anything we've encountered. We thought we could use their history against them, distract them with their past struggles. But instead, they've turned that history into strength." The representatives of the SDOVA sat in silence, their expressions unreadable. The SDOVA had long prided themselves on their ability to predict the course of galactic events, but the rise of humanity had thrown their calculations off course. The idea that a species once considered primitive could rise so rapidly was a concept they had no framework for. "We have to act quickly," Irosh of the Driddy said, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "If humanity continues to rise at this rate, they'll surpass us all. We can't allow that to happen." "They're not like the others we've faced," Karos said, his tone hard. "They don't care about our alliances, our treaties. They care only for their own survival." The realization hit hard. The Council had feared humanity's unpredictability, but now they understood the true depth of that fear. Humanity wasn't just unpredictable. They were a force of nature, capable of rewriting the rules of engagement at will. As the alien representatives grappled with this new understanding, a message arrived from Earth, direct and blunt. It was not a plea for peace. It was a declaration of intent. "We will defend Earth with everything we have," the message read. "And if you stand in our way, we will not hesitate to ensure that humanity's future is secured. The galaxy will bend to our will, or it will break trying." The words were simple, but the meaning was clear. Humanity had made its choice. The galaxy would either learn to live with Earth, or it would be forced to face the consequences. The first shot fired was not from Earth. It came from the edge of the solar system, a missile so precise it seemed to cut through the very fabric of space. The fleet that had gathered outside Earth's orbit didn't announce its arrival with a battle cry. It was silent, methodical, and deadly. A warning shot. Ambassador Donovan's message had been clear. Humanity would not bend. And now, the galaxy had responded with an ultimatum. General Maria Harris stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic display as the incoming missile sliced toward one of Earth's outer defense satellites. The target was obliterated in a flash of light. "Is this it?" Harris muttered under her breath. "Are they really starting a war over this?" Admiral Rajiv Kumar, standing beside her, didn't respond. The words hung in the air as the military's top officers prepared for what they knew was coming next. The Council had decided that humanity was too much of a threat to be ignored. And now, it was humanity's turn to decide how far they would go to protect their future. "We're in range," Kumar said finally. "Shall we respond?" Harris didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were locked on the defensive grid surrounding Earth, where thousands of ships were already mobilizing in the darkness of space. The fleet was vast, but more than that, it was designed for this moment. Fast, agile, and relentless. Humanity had prepared for a time like this, when every ounce of their history and survival instincts would be tested. Now it was their time to strike. "Activate the countermeasures," Harris ordered. A series of commands were input into the console, and the network of Earth's defenses hummed to life. Energy shields activated, intercepting incoming fire with precision. Within seconds, multiple enemy ships entered the outer boundary of the solar system, but the humans were ready. Their advanced warships, designed with technology tailored to counter every move of their enemies, surged forward to meet the challenge. "You have to admit," Kumar said quietly as he watched the human fleet gather, "they're good. They've learned from every war, every battle." "They've had to," Harris replied, her voice grim. "If they want to survive, they have no choice." The moment of truth had arrived. For the first time in history, humanity was facing down a galactic power determined to erase them. And as their enemies closed in, the question remained: would humanity's fierce will to survive be enough to keep the galaxy at bay? The answer came in the form of a barrage. Human warships launched a coordinated offensive, hitting the alien fleet with devastating precision. The missiles that rained down on their enemies weren't just weapons. They were an assertion of humanity's place in the universe. Each shot was a statement: we will not be silenced. On the bridge of Earth's flagship, the Fortitude, Harris watched as the holographic displays lit up with the status of the conflict. She felt no triumph, only the cold understanding that this was the beginning of something far worse. "Multiple impacts," a communications officer reported, voice tight with anxiety. "Enemy shields holding, but their formations are breaking." "Good," Harris said. "Keep pushing." But as the battle raged in the void, something unexpected happened. The enemy fleet, initially united in its assault, began to splinter. Some of the alien ships, their command structures clearly uncertain, hesitated. Others, unsure of the overwhelming force humanity had brought to bear, began to pull back. "They're retreating," Kumar said, disbelief creeping into his voice. "How are they already retreating?" Harris didn't have an answer, but she knew one thing. The galaxy had never seen humanity like this before. They were more than just survivors now. They were warriors. Across the galaxy, the news of the conflict spread like wildfire. The Council's fleets were no longer an unstoppable force. They were forced to reconsider. What had seemed like an easy victory was quickly turning into a nightmare for those who had underestimated Earth's resolve. As the battle outside Earth's atmosphere raged on, inside the Council chamber, the tension had reached a boiling point. The Council was split. Some argued that a full-scale invasion was necessary to quell the human threat, while others suggested negotiation. But one thing was clear: they had never anticipated that humanity's will to survive would lead them here. "This cannot continue," Karos of the Arathri said, his voice heavy with regret. "We've made a mistake." "We all made a mistake," Irash of the Dridi replied sharply. "And now the consequences are unfolding." The battle was not yet over, but the galaxy's landscape was already shifting. The Council, once a united front, was beginning to fracture under the weight of the decision to wage war on Earth. And as humanity's victory on the battlefield became clearer, it was becoming just as clear. The galaxy was no longer a place of peace. It was a battleground. and humanity had just shown that they were more than capable of winning. The galaxy was no longer the same. Once a place where peace had reigned, the universe now simmered with the volatile tension of a conflict no one had predicted. The aftermath of the battle for Earth had shaken the Galactic Council to its core, leaving it fractured and divided. Humanity, the species once considered weak, had proven itself capable of turning the tables, forcing the galaxy's most powerful civilizations to reckon with the rise of a new power. Inside the council chamber, the representatives of the galaxy's most influential species had gathered, but the atmosphere was thick with distrust and uncertainty. Karos of the Arathri, who had once called for caution in the face of humanity's rise, now sat slumped in his seat, his multifaceted eyes narrowed in contemplation. We cannot ignore the fact that humanity has just shown us what it is capable of, he said, his voice heavy. We underestimated them, and now the consequences are clear. They've won battles on their own terms. And we are the ones who will have to live with that. The council chamber was eerily quiet, the gravity of Karos's words sinking in. The species that had once stood united under the banner of the council were now splintered, unable to agree on how to handle the human threat. Some factions called for retaliation, demanding that Earth's newfound power be contained, while others, less inclined to engage in another conflict, suggested diplomacy, even negotiation. But there was no unity, and no leader who could guide the council back to a common purpose. I told you, Irash, the Dritty envoy, hissed bitterly. This is the result of our hesitation. We gave them space to grow, to adapt. And now they're more than a threat. They're a force that could challenge everything we built. They built nothing. Xyler of the Holithians interjected, his translucent skin rippling with agitation. They have only taken what we've already given them. Our technology, our resources. They have stolen their strength. Stolen. The voice of Kel, the SDOVA representative, cut through the rising tension. What do you call what we've done? Have we not offered knowledge, systems, weapons to these so-called lesser species? Humanity did not steal anything. It earned its place. The room seemed to shudder under the weight of Kel's words. He had always been one of the more calculating members of the council, rarely moved by emotional outbursts. His stance, now defensive of humanity, signaled a shift, a realization that the scales were tipping in humanity's favor. The human response was swift and decisive, he continued, his tone unwavering. Their survival instincts have evolved into something far more than we anticipated. The human capacity to fight, to adapt under extreme duress, has proven that they can become masters of the galaxy, if they so choose. Karos's eyes flickered with a hint of remorse. So what do we do now? Do we wait for them to come for us? You don't seem to understand, said Xyler, his tone low and almost regretful. The real question is whether we can stop them. We had the advantage of size, of superior fleets, of ancient technologies. Yet they faced us down, and they won. We've underestimated them for far too long. Irash's mandibles clicked loudly, his frustration rising. But we are not simply going to sit back and let this continue. We cannot let them continue to grow unchecked, or they'll tear down everything we've built. Do you truly think we stand a chance against them now? Karos asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. We've lost too much. Earth's forces are relentless. More importantly, their very mindset has changed. We were prepared for an alien species that would think like we did, diplomatic, strategic. But humans, they are something else entirely. They do not fight to win, they fight to survive. A tense silence fell over the chamber, and for the first time, the council members seemed to understand the full scope of what they were facing. The words echoed in their minds. They fight to survive. The realization was as unsettling as it was undeniable. At that moment, a sharp voice broke the silence. It was Kel of the STOVA, his words cold and measured, as always. Then we must decide, here and now, how to proceed. There is no room for further hesitation. A series of messages flickered across the screens in front of the ambassadors, each one more urgent than the last. The warships on the outskirts of Earth's orbit were mobilizing again, preparing for another assault. But this time, the stakes were higher. This wasn't just about defeating a species. This was about survival. "I propose we send a peace envoy to Earth," Kel said, his voice gaining traction as he spoke. "We must understand their terms, their objectives. Perhaps there is a way to coexist, to forge a new path forward." Karos was still not convinced. "And if they refuse? If they demand our compliance or worse, our destruction?" Then, Kel's voice was as sharp as a blade. "We'll learn what it truly means to fight for survival. The galaxy will have no choice but to adjust, asterisk or perish, asterisk." There it was, the final truth. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably into humanity's hands. The Council could choose to either bend to their will or face the consequences of opposing them. In the distance, beyond the shattered remnants of galactic diplomacy, a new force was rising. One that would not be swayed by politics, by treaties, or by the empty promises of peace. The question now wasn't whether humanity would rise. It was how much of the galaxy they would take with them as they ascended. The Council had underestimated humanity's survival instincts. And now they would pay the price.